This podcast is a B-Side Collections production.
Fertility ain't fair.
That's right.
So let's talk about it. Real, raw, unfiltered with me, your friend Infertility.
Welcome back to Fertility Ain't Fair for another episode. I am so glad you joined me today. Look, I realized that I welcome new people onto the show, every single time we have an episode and say, you're welcome here. It's a safe space, take notes, laugh, cry, share, do whatever it is that you need to do to feel good about being in our little bubble here while we have these great conversations. But I need to give some more info so you can find out more about us. So let me drop the ground facts first. So we are Fertility Ain't Fair. We are a community that understands that all fertility is not created equal, because if I know one thing for sure, two things for certain, it ain't fair. So we're here to talk about it. So our mission is to normalize the conversations around infertility, reproductive health, and parenthood for all. We keep it raw, we keep it real and unfiltered. So that is who we are and what we're trying to do in this space. So welcome if you are new, and if you are returning, I'm so glad to have you back for another good convo, a real convo, and talking to our guest today, who is Miss Kyla Saphir. So you may have mentioned in the or seen in our description today, the title is Only Child ? And today is World Only Child Day. I learned of that, I want to say sometime late last year, because I learned something new like every single week in this space. And so Kyla is a new author. She is a mother, a yoga instructor, an educator, and she created an amazing book called On Brighter Days, her first book. And so this all came from her experience that's still happening with secondary infertility, and talking to her young daughter, and her starting to ask those questions like, hey, mommy, like I see my friend, or my classmate, they have like a little brother or little sister, like where's mine, right? Those are normal questions that kids ask. And so how that makes a mom or a family feel when they are dealing with secondary infertility. And the reality is that, you may or may not be able to ever give that child, your only child at the time, a sibling, and how that makes you feel, and what you do to not only deal with that from a parent perspective and a woman's perspective, but also how you deal with that, with your child. How do you talk to them? How do you tell them? How do you explain to them this crazy thing called secondary infertility, right? A small child at that. And so we were connected, Kyla and I, through another friend of Fertility Ain't Fair. And so when I found out about her book, I was just like, wow, you found an amazing, niche in secondary infertility with your child to create this amazing story and really help out some other family or mom who is trying to explain and have their child understand, like, hey, it may or may not happen, or mommy's trying, and but we still love you and you're our number one priority right now. So I won't give it all away, but it's amazing. So we will definitely discuss her book and talk about her journey to motherhood and through pregnancy, and dealing with things like fibroids, having a condition during her delivery, and what that looks like for her today, right? Still currently in the secondary infertility space. So all those things coming soon on this episode. If you don't already follow us on Instagram, social media, please do, at Fertility Ain't Fair, and definitely check us out on our website, fertilityaintfair.com. But look, I'm going to let Kyla give you her story and her transparency, and we will hop into this episode of Fertility Ain't Fair, Only Child ? Hopping into Fertility Ain't Fair is Kyla. Thank you so much for hopping in and joining us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm excited.
I am too. I have to just first thank you for sharing your journey, your life, and your story and putting it all on paper. I know that was not an easy task, I'm sure, because of emotions and everything that comes with kind of, writing about the years of your life and this journey and what you've gone through from beginning to now. And so thank you for writing it down and then sharing it with all of us today.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me. And it's so nice to be heard and listened to. So thank you.
Yes, well, you're absolutely seen and heard here. So thank you for that. So we have a lot to discuss on this episode. So let's start at the very top with how do you define yourself? What are the words or phrases to describe Kyla as of today?
I love that you asked this question because I'm always impressed with how people answer. And I find that I'm constantly evolving, like many people, but especially becoming a mom. And I've transitioned in my careers too. So, like Michelle Obama says in Becoming, it isn't about arriving somewhere or achieving a certain aim. It's a means of evolving, a way to reach continuously toward a better self. And that's kind of how I feel where I am or where I'm going. You start out as, born into your family. I started as a sister, a daughter. I became a friend, an auntie. My personal life, I became a wife and a mother. But I've also been a student and a traveler. I've lived on 4 different continents and taught on 3 of those. I've been an early childhood educator since college. So I've taught pre-K through 2nd grade and have a master's in early childhood education. And it was really good for me to live in different places and see how education works in a variety of settings, including Head Start, Montessori. I've worked at nature preschools. And then when I had my daughter, I wanted to transition out of the classroom and do something where I could be a full-time mom and part-time something else. And my second passion is yoga. So I decided to do my yoga certification. And I really wanted to specialize in pre and postnatal yoga. And I ended up starting my own yoga business called Yoga Mama Columbia. That's where I live. And most recently, I'm an author of a children's book called On Brighter Days about my journey and my daughter's journey into being her being an only child. So that's where I am today. It could change next week or next year. Yeah. Yeah.
That is amazing. I mean, you've just done so much and seen so much, but it definitely adds to your perspective and how you operate in your life day to day, I'm sure. So let's talk about the motherhood journey. I know from what you had written down, you had said, for 34 years, you had kind of put that part of the journey on hold. And, you did a variety of other things. And then you met your husband, got married, but you guys were still like, hey, we're in no rush, and then unfortunately, your mom had a medical incident, had a stroke, and had told you, before I leave this earth, I want grandkids. So that must have had a slight pressure on your timeline. So tell us a little about how that changed, what was next for you and your husband to plan a family.
Yeah, I mean, that was a very crazy year. My husband and I got married in September 2014, and he was finishing up his residency, and I was finishing up teaching, and had just completed my master's. And we were going to move to Seattle the next year. He was going to do a 1-year fellowship, and we're going to move the end of June. And so, in June is kind of just, in general in the school year, it's a crazy time. He was graduating from his medical residency. I was finishing up graduating my kindergartners. We were about to do this big cross-country drive and move to Seattle. And a few weeks before we left, my mom had this really severe stroke, and it was, devastating. I ended up being at the hospital a lot with her, and it just looked very different, the ending of our time in Chicago, where we were living and where both our families are. So when she was in the hospital, that was one thing she said to me, and I was kind of the next up in line. I just got married, she was like, I want to be there for my grandkids. And my brother has a few kids, so she wasn't without any grandbabies, but she really wanted me as the youngest. I'm the youngest of 5. As her daughter, she really wanted that. So I took that to heart, and we moved to Seattle that June, or the beginning of July. And I set up my care with my doctor. I got my IUD out, and we decided to start trying a little bit earlier than we expected. We had wanted to wait a little bit because we didn't know we were going to be after this year. We wanted to save some money. We wanted to figure out life. And we just, not even been married a year. Yeah, so we started trying. And do you want me to go into what happened next?
Of course.
So we thought it would take a few months to a year. And I dread saying that, when you can conceive on the first try, that's like not the norm. And that wasn't even what we expected. I don't know. I'd just been preventing pregnancy for so long that I didn't even think that this was even a chance on the first try, but it ended up being that way. And because I didn't think it was, I had actually just taken my niece to college, my oldest niece, with my best friend, my sister-in-law. It happened to be around my 35th birthday. So we were like, having margaritas. We were sitting in hot tubs, eating raw fish and poke and
all the things,
literally everything on the do not do when you're pregnant list. And so I was like, whatever. And when I got back to Seattle and I was like, let me just check. Let me just take a pregnancy test. And it was positive. And I could not believe it. Like that wasn't really our expectation. And so we really had to switch gears and figure out life because she was going to be born within the 1 year that we were going to be in Seattle, which was great. I'd actually lived there before. So I had friends there. I had a nice community. I had other people who were moms now. And my best friend in doula was a nanny. And I was nannying that year as well. So I was around kids and families. So it was a great place to be. And also just for care for mothers, it was fabulous. I had like the best medical care. The insurance covers things like prenatal acupuncture, prenatal massages. Wow. I had a midwife. I didn't have to have just an OB. The midwife was in the hospital too. So I could have, the best of both worlds kind of thing in case something happened, which we found out there were some issues. So, but yeah, it was, that's the beginning of the pregnancy. Yeah.
Well, I know at what point, I know you had fibroids and you've been dealing with that for the last, several years. And so when did you find out that you had fibroids?
Okay, so this is interesting. I actually knew before I got pregnant because when I lived in Argentina and I was teaching at a school there, and I had really good health insurance because they have socialized medicine. And so one of their preventative cares, I found an OB gynecologist, and they do routine transvaginal ultrasounds. So they look inside your womb. It's like I was 28 or something. I wasn't at high risk or anything. That was their care. And I've been listening to your podcast for a while, Brittany, and I feel like if we just added that to the care of women, all these women who suffer from fibroids and issues with them, you could find out. And so,
yes.
Right?
Yes.
It's like, that's such an easy thing it's kind of a weird, I don't know if you've had one, but it's not like the greatest feeling, especially if it's a male doctor.
Oh, I've had several. I had them all. Every time I go to my doctor, I have one.
Yes, you have a lot going on in your womb too, but,
oh yes.
But so they had detected them, but they were small. Like the biggest one was 3 centimeters. So I didn't really think about it. But early on in my pregnancy, I had some bleeding, which is really scary. Everyone, that's like a sign of miscarriage. So I went in earlier than for my, I think 10 week was what I was supposed to do. And it was 8 weeks. And they, checked for the heartbeat and they did a transvaginal and they saw the fibroids and they looked bigger than what I kind of discussed with my doctor before. So they're like, okay, you have fibroids, we'll monitor them. There was one in particular that got big, and they said it happens most during the first trimesters when they grow the most because they feed off estrogen and the extra blood flow, like gremlins. I'm like, what, you can't feed them after me?
They are like gremlins.
Just like in there, just messing up everything. I had way more ultrasounds than a typical pregnancy, which I also didn't realize. I thought everyone got like 8 ultrasounds, but they were monitoring the baby and making sure that, there can be all kinds of issues with them. As you've probably found out a little bit in your journey that the chances of premature labor, slower labor, plus chances of placenta abruption, growth restriction, and possible C-section. So they wanted to see if those were going to be in the realm of things. But honestly, I had a pretty easy pregnancy, except for about 3 months in, this is something I didn't even know about, but there's fibroid degeneration where the fibroid ends up breaking down a little bit, which does not feel great. And I was having all this, pain. And so again, I went in and they assumed it was that. And you can't really do anything for it. You can just take painkillers. They were like, you're allowed to take some Tylenol. And so that helped with the pain. It kind of went away. But I feel like after you two, I feel like I could be a doctor after all these things, all these.
I'm telling you, the things that I don't say most anymore that, many women would have no ideas going on in your body. And the things that you learn are just wild. It's like, if you only knew.
Yes. Well, and the fibroid that was the biggest one. They're called leiomyomas. That's the medical term. So we named the big one Leo, and
That was funny. I love that.
he like grew alongside our daughter because like every ultrasound was like Leo and her like twins, or like we called it her pillow. And he ended up being 10 centimeters by the end, which is like
Wow.
bigger than your actual uterus is 7 centimeters. So he was like just huge. But luckily he was like on top, and he's like in a place that she couldn't easily get out. I had a vaginal birth, and but there was a chance there would have been a C-section and all those things. But she grew okay. She was a little smaller than they thought she was going to be big, but I think they were measuring the fibroid because she ended up being smaller than we imagined. But yeah.
Well, let me back up on the fibroid thing. So a couple things that are very important. You said number one, when you were in Argentina, and I'm sure there are other countries outside the U.S. where these ultrasounds or other tests are routine for women's care. That is just so important to note. I mean, I think we all know that we have a healthcare issue and crisis in this country. But as you mentioned, there are simple things like a ultrasound or blood work that can be done to assist in having a woman be knowledgeable about what's happening in her body, and also preventative, so that you're not, whenever it happens, I'd say in your 30s, right, or your 40s, and trying to figure out why something's not happening or why this pain has been here for the last 20 years of my life. And it could have all been figured out, diagnosed, and remedied or something. You would have more options, right, before trying to have a child or do whatever you want to do with your choices. But it's just so crazy to me when I hear that. I'm like, wow, because I highlighted that in your notes, and I was like, it was routine care because it should be.
Right. And they actually also did it wasn't a mammogram, it was like an ultrasound of my breasts, which again, I was 28 and I'd already seen a, gynecologist back in the US, but no one had ever even thought of that.
No.
Those were, I was like, this is the routine. And I was a teacher. I wasn't like a high paying profession, but I just they offer good healthcare to their citizens. And I wasn't trying to get pregnant. It was nothing about my reproductive health. It really was just women's care, which I really, it blew my mind that was. I also didn't get any bills after. I kept waiting for bills because I was so used to the US. And I was like, wait, the people are like, no, it's covered by your insurance. I was like,
I know, but where's the other out of pocket? Like,
exactly. I'm like, I know I need to pay something. They're like, no, it's covered. I couldn't believe it. I was like, this is amazing.
Oh, we have so much work to do here. But anyway, I'll pass on that.
Especially for women's care. I agree.
So being pregnant with fibroids, I'm glad that you brought it up and talked about, what you experienced, because personally, I worry about that. Just, being someone who has dealt with them for longer than I even knew. I did know. And then, in every chart that I've had since then, it's always like multiple fibroids, multiple fibroids. And it really wasn't until last year that I was like, I need to push further on what this means.
Yeah.
And, we were talking, we had done 4 IUIs, and of course they were unsuccessful. And so when we were talking about IVF, it was like, hey, I'm concerned because you all are very excited to start this process, but I don't think it's right or safe or medically whatever sound to put an embryo potentially in a uterus that's full of fibroids, right? Like, am I crazy here? That seems like that wouldn't be a good idea. Like, I need to figure out like where exactly are they, and are they, potentially in a location that could hinder, growth, or even hinder egg retrieval for that matter. Before we even get to putting an embryo in here, all the steps to get to that point. And so,
have they talked about like myomectomies with you, or?
So I had a couple removed a couple years ago, but they've come back since. When I had my tube removed, they also removed like 3 fibroids during that process. So When I went in last year, my OBG was like, okay, hey, I will schedule an ultrasound for you. I went to the hospital to do it because I wasn't currently at my clinic because we were kind of off for a while. Um, and so they did an ultrasound, and when I came back, all it said was multiple fibroids, and it had no other information. I was furious. I was like, I knew this coming into it, and now I'm going to pay out of pocket for an elective like ultrasound that literally told me nothing new. So then I took it back to my fertility clinic. I was like, hey, I know we're not doing active treatments, but I need your help because they don't know how to scan me properly, and this isn't making any sense. So my doctor was great. And she's like, hey, no problem. Come in. I hear you. Let's do another ultrasound. Let's do a different one that's a little bit more intense. And then let's also do, what was it called? It was an H, not the SG. It was the other one.
The HSG is the where they put
That's
the
the dye test, right? Yep. So this was another H test, and God, I gotta remember it now. But it was similar in that there was a catheter and there was some dye used, but it was not that one. It was different because it essentially is like a mock egg transfer, if you will. And so she was saying that this is something we would do regardless moving forward in the IVF process, but we would do it now because it also was able to show other areas and cavities where things could be hiding.
Okay.
So after we did that, we walked through it, and we're in there, we're on the screen. She's pointing at everything, giving me all the details. She's like, hey, as of right now, I'm not seeing anything that would hinder an egg retrieval.
Okay.
So that's good. And she said, I'm also not seeing anything that potentially, hinder a transfer. But of course, let's get your eggs out first. And then if we feel like we need to do something before we do a transfer, like a surgery or whatever else, we can discuss it then.
Yeah.
So that's where I left it off, like the middle of last year. And so we were waiting for our insurance to kick in this year. So better place. But it took a while to get to that point. I was like, you guys, I have to know more than just multiple. And like, that's not helping. So I'm glad you brought that up because I worry about that.
No, I mean, we're like in the same boat because the regular ultrasound can only see so much. And is it
Right.
stereoscopy maybe? I got that one too. I got like everything. Like we just check the boxes. But they really do need to look more intensively with fibroids because they really can't tell from the ultrasound if it's blocking the fallopian tube, where it is, if it's intramural or subserosal, all these terms you start learning. And how that impacts your fertility. Yeah. And especially if you're going to do all that work, you're going to go through a lot. You want to make sure there's like a chance, that it can implant,
Right.
everything's healthy in there. So I get it. I totally get it.
Yes. So with you, pregnancy was overall okay and wonderful. And then you had a term that I had not heard of yet, and it was retained placenta during your delivery and how awful and painful that was. But what is that exactly?
Okay, so you're right. My pregnancy was actually pretty smooth. Besides having all these tests and like a lot of fear, around what's going to happen when she comes out or if she's going to be okay, those kind of things. But I actually, I'm going to back up a little bit and then I'll get to the retained placenta, which again, a term you didn't hear until it happens to you or your friend or whatever. But I went into labor and I had a doula, which I 100% recommend. I'm not sure what's going on with COVID regulations, but having that extra person there is just amazing, a support person. And she was a friend of mine before and just happened to be a doula. But she came over and saw how far I was in labor, which I didn't know. I was just like, I'm going to labor at home. I was doing some yoga poses on all fours. And she told my husband, she's like, get the car. We need to get her to the hospital now. Like she has to go in. And I wasn't like wanting a hospital birth, but because of all these other risks, I was 35 and all these, medical things. I was also GBS positive, which is group B strep, which they have to give you antibiotics while you're in labor. It's a whole nother thing. So anyway, I had these factors. Okay. I got to the hospital. I was 9 centimeters dilated. So I was like really close. So I got to, and in Seattle, they're like very conducive to mothers and laboring. So I got to sit in a tub, like just a regular bathtub, but it helped me relax. And because I wasn't going to get medication, like you're so far along, there's no reason to give you epidural or anything at this point. And then pushing took a little over 2 hours, which was pretty intense because my labor was real quick. It was just like 6 hours total from like, oh, I feel a little cramped to like, okay, here we go. But she took a while to come out. And I think, again, she had to move around this giant fibroid. And then her breathing was really fast. So they put her on me for a few moments, but then they had to take her to the NICU. And the reason I'm saying the doula is so good, she stayed with me and my husband went with the baby to the NICU, which was it was wonderful. And then I was unmedicated and I had some tearing. So they were stitching me up and they were trying to get the placenta out and it wouldn't come off. And they think it got stuck on the fibroid, and the fibroid, because it's there, the uterus can't contract as much to push out the placenta, which is very dangerous. Like you have to get it out. You could, bleed to death kind of thing. So they had to manually remove the fibroid. And this is like,
Wait.
like a hand. I was like, okay, I'm done. I'm like, get your hand out of me. And they're like, no, the placenta's not coming. I'm like, what? So I'm like freaking out because it's really painful. And I just gave birth. I'm like, I want to relax. And my doula's like helping me breathe and kind of explaining what's going on. And my midwife's hand was too big. So they had to call a gynecologist to like come replace her hand. It was a smaller hand that could like manually remove the placenta from inside of me, which was a crazy experience. And then they're like talking to the nurse. They're like, how much? She was like, okay, we can give you medication now, painkillers. And like, how much? I was like, give me all of it. Give me
whatever you have, whatever is safe, but whatever you have.
I'm like, this is crazy. So that was something I was not prepared for. As you've heard many times on your podcast, like things you just don't even know, or that could be a possibility.
Wow.
But they got it out. Luckily, I mean, I didn't have any extra bleeding because of it. And there was no risk, which is really good. I was afraid that they were like, because then it came out all mangled and crazy looking, and they want the one piece. So that's something fun to look forward to, Brittany.
Oh my goodness.
Hopefully not.
God bless you and your medical team, right? Like, seriously.
Yeah. And then, being in the hospital, like having our daughter have to go to the NICU, she had fluid in her lungs. She pooped on the way out. And so they think it was meconium. But they were wonderful. And she was a fighter. She was like, I want to get out of here. And it ended up being, NICU stays can be very traumatic. Obviously, it's like the beginning of your motherhood. And like when I got to see her, she had tubes in her nose and in her mouth, and it was terrible. It was like scary and sad. And she kept trying to rip them out. They had to like duct tape them on her face. She was like, this girl's strong. She was like, 6 pounds. She was ripping them out. And, but yeah, it was good. Where the nurses were wonderful. Helped her start breastfeeding with me. NICU nurses, you are angels. Like literally, they took such good care of us, such good care of our daughter. She was tongue tied, so she had a hard time latching. So they did it while we were in the hospital. They, what is it? Oh my God, I can't, frenectomy, I think it's called, where they snip the tongue, bottom of the tongue.
Wait, what is that?
So if the baby's tongue can't like come up, it can't like wrap around the nipple to nurse. And so they just gave her a little sugar, which she loved. It like relaxed her. And then they just do a little cut, and then she'll start nursing right away and getting her tongue to use it again. So that's a whole thing too. We didn't know about that. And a lot of babies are tongue tied. It usually takes them a little longer to figure it out. But we were already in the hospital, so they found that. And they gave her first bath there. And anyway, it was it was a scary experience, but it was also really positive in a lot of ways. So, and we got to stay there. We just stayed in different recovery rooms and then the family rooms. And so props to Seattle Medical Care and good insurance.
It sounds fantastic. I mean, outside of all that's happening, of course, it sounds like they did the best possible job to go through all this was like at their facility. So that's amazing. I just heard like 5 words, but okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm also a white woman in a very, like a setting that's people like, were responsive to what I was saying. And then like, I don't know, I feel like for Black women, it's a lot different. They're not listened to as well. And my husband's in the medical profession, and it is like, it's predominantly white as well. So I do know my privilege. Like I totally honor that. And being able to have support to pay for, she actually was a friend, so she did it for free, but paying for a doula is also a cost that can be.
Right.
So I feel really lucky that I was able to have this experience.
Wow. That is a birth story.
It's something.
Wow. Well, like I said, obviously blessed that she was healthy and you were healthy, and, being a new mom. And then I know you guys moved again. So I know that community is very important, I think, as a woman, as a new mom, as a mom in general, and so I did yoga a couple times. And so I know you all moved to Columbia after that, right?
Correct. Yeah. Well, so I didn't put this in the story because it was short-lived, but we actually went to Chicago. My husband had 2 months before he started his job in Columbia, South Carolina. So we actually got to go home. And we stayed with his family at his family's house, and we had all this support, and he was off. So it was really nice. Like we got to kind of bring her into our community of Chicago. And, all our friends got to see her. My friends who had babies also came over. And so it was really, that was like a really special short time. And then we went to Columbia where we didn't have family. And we knew a couple of people, his coworkers were from Chicago, that came down and kind of recruited him here. So we had their two moms to the wives of the other doctors, and they're wonderful. They have little kids too. So it was really nice to have a little community, but they were busy. They had their lives here. One of the women, her daughters were in grade school, so they're a little on a different path than me and my 3-month-old.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And so I know that you started your own yoga studio and then created a community for yourself. And so tell us why having a community as a mom, especially a new mom, is just so important.
Yeah. So actually, let me back up a little bit. In Seattle, I was able to do prenatal yoga and postnatal yoga, which were so beneficial in terms of just getting your body ready, being in touch, taking time to realize this is pretty amazing. You're creating life right now, and then learning breathing techniques for labor. And I also got to meet a lot of moms. That community was really nice for me because they were literally in the same boat as me. A couple moms were due before me, so that was even nicer because I could ask them a ton of questions, during pregnancy, like what comes next and things like that. And when I moved to Columbia, there was literally no prenatal or postnatal yoga. So there was nothing for moms. And it's a pretty big city. It's about 200,000 people. And there were pregnant women all over. It's the South. So literally every other woman's pregnant. I'm like, okay. And so I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. We just moved to this new town. I want to do something that was for me, not related to my husband, not related to the baby. And yoga has been kind of my release, my rejuvenation, my space that's good for my mental health and my physical health. So I really wanted to get certified to teach just in general. And then I did a certification for pre and postnatal yoga as well. Because I wanted to offer that for other moms. I was like, I was so lucky to have that, and I couldn't believe it didn't exist. So I was like, well, let me create it. So I started Yoga Mama Columbia, and I didn't actually have my own studio. That was a dream. COVID kind of nixed that, but I just taught in other people's studios because once I proposed it, a few studios were open to it because they were like, oh, it's not consistent. People don't come. I'm like, well, I want to build it up. So I just literally blind emailed and called everyone I knew, every studio I knew, and talked to other doulas and people in the community to try to promote it. And my first class, I only had 2 moms. And then it just kept growing. Then people started hearing about it and realizing the benefits of it. So I ended up kind of having, for me, the support of other moms. And then they got to connect, especially people do around the same time. 2 moms ended up doing a nanny share. We'd have, meetups at the playground or coffee shop. And it was really wonderful to have that support because it is very isolating. Having a baby and being by yourself is really hard. So having that community of other women going through the same things was amazing. And they also helped me with my business. One woman helped create the logo. Another woman printed out a big poster for me with her company. One helped me with my website. It was just wonderful. I felt this great sense of community and support.
And I just love that because I feel like you see an opportunity, you see a place where you can thrive and where someone else can reap the benefits, and you created your own community, your own space, in your own lane. So that's just really, really amazing. Especially as a new mom, already being busy and tired, exhausted. You were like, hey, I'm going to start a whole business. But it was so selfless because you was like, I know I could benefit, but also so could so many women in this community. So that's really fantastic. It goes along with, we'll get into your book later, but how I feel like you took an opportunity to create another community in a different form, bring light to something. And so, clearly taking on, passion opportunities is part of just who you are as well. You're welcome.
I don't always see it that way. I feel like, oh, I'm just doing this. But then, yeah, you're right. When you reflect, you're like, oh, wow, that was kind of, that's pretty nice.
No, you help so many people, in doing this and seeing the opportunity there to do it. So at what point in time did your daughter first say to you, I want a sibling, or mommy, where's my fill in the blank. Like, when did that happen for you, and how was that first question for you?
When we got to Colombia, I was told check about 6 months after about the fibroids. So I was trying to see if it was possible to have more kids, and just see like what was going on for my own health. And then I'll get to where my daughter comes in because she is part of this equation. So at 6 months, they saw the fibroid, but it had shrunk a little bit, which they said would happen because there's not as much estrogen and things like that. And no one I talked to, the OB, or I talked to some midwives, no one thought it would be a problem. They were like, okay, it's smaller. It should be fine. You already got pregnant once. So when my daughter was about 2, we decided to start trying again. I was 37, which, is like geriatric, and the over 35 is this old.
I know, I hate it. Like, what?
Yes. Which is crazy. Obviously there is some decline, but it's to put women in this category is crazy. But I'm an A-type personality. And so I was like, all right, well, let's get on this. I'll get I had an IUD, and I got that second one out. And I was like, it's going to be like the first time. I'll get pregnant, 10 months later, we'll have this baby. We'll figure out family stuff because my husband's schedule is still busy and we didn't have family down here. But I was like, we'll figure it out. But then it didn't work that first time, and it continuously didn't work, trying, naturally. And at the same time, like literally everyone started asking me about having another kid. Like at my daughter's dance class, this like Chinese grandpa asked me, and like, not to be mean, like I have to like point out that he's Chinese, but he was literally like in broken English. He was like asking me about my fertility. I'm like, what? Okay, I have a daughter.
Why is this happening here? Why?
People at the playground, and not even like like it is so invasive, and people don't realize that. They're just like, oh, you should have another kid. And I was like, I would just say like, yeah, I'm trying, or I can't, and just kind of try to shut them up because, like this is none of your business. And family would ask too, because, we had one and she was getting older. And, but yeah, as you know, like I am so much more aware of asking. I do not ask people that question anymore because I'm like, this is not, it's so sensitive. Like I had no idea until I went through it myself, which I also like, it's a blessing and a curse. Like I'm realizing so much more that I took my fertility for granted. And so many women, they don't have the opportunity. And so about 6 months in to trying, I went, because that's again, when you're a certain age, like all these new timelines, I went to go see my OB gynecologist here, and she did more tests, seeing my hormone levels, uterine lining, things like that. My husband got tested too, and he was checked out fine. Everything looked good. Like literally, they're like, all right, just keep trying. She offered for me to see a specialist, but I'm of the mindset, especially since we had our daughter, was like, if this doesn't happen, kind of naturally, then I'm not ready to see a specialist or whatever. But about a year into it, and I was doing all these things. I was super active. I ate well. I did acupuncture. I was getting chiropractic work done for, just my health. But I was like, why isn't this working? And of course, people are saying, just relax, just relax. I'm like, I am freaking relaxed.
Like stop saying that because they're making me not relaxed. Stop saying that.
And it doesn't help. That's nothing.
No, it does not help.
So about a year later, my daughter started asking, because she was speech delayed. So I can't exactly remember when. I think it was like 2.5, maybe 2.5 to 3. She started asking. So we knew it wasn't happening, having a kid. So we're like, let's get a fur sibling. So we got a puppy, which I don't know if you have had a puppy. That dog was harder than our infant. I mean, like this dog, I read all the books on dog. I'm like very type. I read every book about pregnancy, every book about puppies, raising dogs. And this dog just did not follow any of the things it said. Like they don't pee in their crates, and our dog did. So like 3 a.m. would be washing this dog off in the bathtub, and she ate everything, tore up everything in the house, and so we stopped trying during that period because that was really intense.
That was enough.
We were awake at night. I'm like, this is like so much more intense than a kid. So we took a little break, and then when my daughter turned 3, that's when she really started asking more because she saw all our neighbors were having babies. My prenatal yoga students, she was fascinated by pregnancy, and she would put a baby in her belly and pretend to be pregnant and give birth. Oh. She was very aware of what I did. And so she was really just, curious and excited. And our family members, my cousins were having babies and friends. So she was really on it and saw like, oh, my mom gets to be pregnant, and then there's this baby, and, she's very caretaking. So that added, a lot of pressure too, to me. And it seemed like everyone around me it was so easy for them almost. I was like, I'm trying so hard and doing all the right things. And all these people just popping out 3 to 5 kids, like legit, like that's just the norm. I'm like, I'm from Chicago where my sisters don't have kids. They're just probably not going to. My best friend doesn't. It's just not, one friend has 1 kid and that's it. Like my world it's very different. So, and I do know, like the women in my yoga classes, I knew some of them did struggle and a lot of them did IVF or had assisted reproductive technology in other ways. I knew it wasn't easy, but it just, from the outside perspective, or the inside perspective, it seemed that way.
Right. Yep. And I've also heard a lot of women say that, secondary infertility is sometimes they feel like it's not viewed the same way as primary infertility.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't get the same level of sensitivity or like care that it should, because you'll hear people say, but you have 1 child at least, or, well, you haven't had a miscarriage, or, and I hate when we try to one up each other's trauma. I hate it. And I know it's the easy way to go sometimes. And for those of us in the primary stage, like myself, yeah. So on Instagram, you're like, damn her. Like, I'm so mad right now, right? Here she goes with her 3 kids. Here she goes, pregnant every year. This girl, you know. And so I could say, oh well, that's not fair, and because it's not. But or whatever, life's not fair. But I think when we continuously, either intentionally or not, or directly or indirectly, kind of one up each other's struggles, that just creates barriers, which is why we don't talk about things more, because we're so afraid of what the other woman may say or what she's thinking about me. Really, this doesn't create safe spaces like this where we can just talk about it and be honest, because your secondary infertility is just as real and hurtful and traumatizing as my primary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so it's still real, it's still painful, and I'm glad that we're talking about it, and that more women, I think, are coming to terms with being able to admit it and say it and talk about it, because it is still very real and it should be respected and given the same level of care than as anyone's infertility. No matter if you have 1 kid, 2 kids, if you still want more and you're not able to, that still hurts.
Yeah, exactly.
So.
Well, and I had never even heard the term secondary infertility. Honestly, like I knew, infertility. I've heard that term, and I actually didn't like it. I didn't realize that 50% of women who have struggles with infertility, it is secondary. All these things I'm learning, because it isn't talked about very much, and it's not like I didn't know anyone. I knew people who had primary infertility just because that's a little bit more obvious, but secondary is like this kind of more invisible type of infertility. So yeah, I thank you for acknowledging that. That is very true. And I did feel like I didn't know who to talk to. There wasn't anyone going through what that I knew of that was struggling the same way. So it was very isolating and traumatic. and realizing it's trauma, like that's new too to me. Like I've been working with therapists and like just hearing from other women that you have a lot of grief, and it is a traumatic experience. So
yeah. And I agree. I had never, looked at this journey as a trauma, like a life-changing event, or a trauma. I had never looked at it that way until probably the last, year or so, when I heard someone else say it. And I was like, you know what? You're right. This is a traumatic life event. And even when it gets resolved, if it gets resolved and you are able to conceive and have a child, it's still like past trauma. It doesn't just go away magically because you have a child. It's still kind of, I called it a scar before, but a scar that kind of just is there because it took a while to get there probably, and a lot that happened that you probably did not or were not able to fully deal with. And so it's still kind of there. But
yeah, well, you go from like trying to conceive to being infertile. Like it's kind of a weird to own it or say it. Like I am infertile. Right. I have secondary fertility. I struggle with. I don't like it to define me, but it's
right. Of course. Right. Exactly.
It's hard. It's a really tough, and then it's not like an easy conversation. People don't talk about it because I'm not like, hanging out with my girls, like, guess what, guys? I have secondary infertility. It's not like this casual conversation. It's like, I went home to Chicago and told everyone in my family in person, and had lunch with one of my best friends and told her, like, it's a very, I don't know, it's very vulnerable, and
It is.
you feel like let down by your body, and this kind of personal shame, even though it's, a medical condition that it happens to a lot of people. But yeah, it's not easy. It's not an easy discussion. It's not an easy topic. So, but it should.
Not at all. Right. And so I know you all have looked up other options, so, for adoption or surrogacy. And so at what point in time did your book come up? Because as you mentioned earlier, you wrote with your daughter on Brighter Days, which is coming out in April, pre-order now. But when did you decide that was an outlet for you to use to just create this space to talk about, secondary infertility, and through your daughter's experience as well?
Yeah. So when we found out, about a year and a half of trying, I did go to a reproductive endocrinologist to get more tests done. And it really showed like I would have to have all kinds of medical procedures to remove the fibroid, and then most likely IVF, and then a C-section. So really intensive, invasive, expensive medical procedures that might not have guaranteed a baby. And when they told me this, it was, very devastating, because I didn't realize like how much would have to happen for it to, I just assumed we would just try hard enough and this baby would come. And it was like very traumatic experience. The doctor had no bedside manner. I was left on the table, she told me all this information, and luckily a nurse was with me, and I was like kind of bawling and processing. And so when I went home, I talked to my husband and my daughter about it. And I told them, like, this is what would have to happen. And my daughter was 3 at the time. We had this 6-month-old puppy. My husband works very unpredictable hours. We had no family, and I just launched my yoga business. Like I was, really trying to grow it. So I was like, could I be, incapacitated for 6 to 8 weeks during the myomectomy, and 6 to 8 more weeks from the C-section, like all these things, it just didn't seem feasible. So then we kind of decided, this is not going to be our path. Which was, it was heartbreaking. And that night I actually was teaching a prenatal yoga class, which I just felt like I needed to be there for the community of women, but it was really hard to be around a bunch of pregnant women that night. But I stuck with it. And afterwards I called my sister, like the night that I was told. And, I was crying and talking to her about it. And she's actually a social worker. And both my sisters are adopted. And I was kind of talking to her about, what are my other options? Is adoption one of them? And she was like, Kyla, give yourself time to grieve, like slow down, let you process this. This is, this is a lot of news you just learned. So she was wonderful. She was very supportive and kind of helped me slow down. But we thought about adoption and surrogacy, and they're not easy options either. God, I love the ideas of both of them. And like, I know they work for a lot of people, but it is a huge commitment. It takes years. There's a lot that you have to go into it. And with my husband, his job is not conducive to having a lot of time and energy to put into it. So it'd all be on me. We decided it wasn't going to be for us. And my daughter was, still asking for a sibling, and the dog wasn't enough, even though she calls her sissy. We decided, I was like, I really need to, get some help. So I started working with a therapist, and one of her suggestions was write down your feelings, write down yours and your daughter's feelings about what's going on, to help process this whole thing, because she was facing a loss too. This was something that she could have. And I hadn't thought about it that way. I hadn't really seen it through her eyes. I mean, I know that's what she wanted. And she would call it my fibroid. Do you still have your fibroid? Like the way she said it, she knew. And we were very honest and open with her. She's a smart, very precocious little kid. And I showed her the picture. I'm like, this is why we can't have another baby. And that was 2019. And then 2020, the entire world blew up. And it actually, I don't know, it almost was like a breather. Like we were more isolated, which is really hard, but there was no social pressure on the outside. I wasn't teaching my classes in person. I moved some online, but really kind of cut back on the prenatal and postnatal classes, which I loved, but it was, I don't know if other women go through this with a job that they have that's so, like personally difficult because of what you're going through. I don't know anyone who's kind of had this. So I kind of had to give up that my passion because it was so painful at the same time. And I love these women. Like I'm still in touch with tons of them. We still play dates and things. And now that I've opened up about what's been going on, they've been really supportive. These other moms. But yeah, so my daughter and I wrote down our feelings. And then I was talking to a friend who I met through, I was her postnatal yoga teacher during COVID. We did it all online, our yoga. And then we were talking and she said she wrote a book for her daughter about, she's got some physical ailments. And she wrote this love story, this poem to her daughter about how mom can't always be there for you. Sometimes we're going to have to go to the doctor or we'll just have to lay on the couch, but I still love you kind of thing. Like that's her journey into her motherhood experience. And when I told her, I was like, hey, this is what I'm thinking and working on with my daughter. Would you be interested in publishing it? And she said, yeah, there was nothing else out there. I've only found one other book about secondary infertility and kids wanting siblings, even though I know this is pretty common now that I've kind of put it out in the world. A lot of people have talked to me that this is also their experience. And so it's been really validating and I feel very supported during this journey because it's scary to put yourself out there and like I don't want people to feel pity for me or I don't want to feel shame, so so that's where we are in the book. So we wrote it, published it. We're getting the proof actually really soon, and then the book will be out in April for full sale in the world.
That is super exciting. Well, congratulations on this new project.
Thank you.
Yeah, and like I said, you took something else that there was a lane for opportunity that can also help so many people and also bring voice to a topic that is not talked about enough. And to add the angle of your daughter was just, when I saw this is so amazing. Like I also would have probably not thought of it that way. Um, but to your credit, like did you talk to her about this? You were open and honest about what was happening. And even though she's young, she still understood, right? Like she's able to understand. They're very, very bright. They know something's going on, or they have their own little thoughts about things. And so you chose to bring her along in the journey and not kind of hide it, to probably protect her, but you chose to really talk to her about what mom is going through. And what an amazing experience for her to grow up that way, to, you all to have that open line of communication on health and reproduction and, things that for I think a lot of women in different communities, is not talked about as much. It's like, oh no, we don't discuss that, It's like, oh no, we can't talk about why mom only had one kid, or we can't talk about, mom had fibroids and no one knew about it. Like I hope that more of this open lines of communication goes beyond just our peers and our cousins, aunts, moms, whatever, but just really goes to the next generation of women who are able to talk openly and ask questions, and it's not shunned or silenced in the household or even out of the household. So kudos to you for that parenting skill.
Thank you. Well, it is interesting because my mom actually, she didn't have, my sisters aren't adopted because she can't conceive. She had 3, we call them homemade kids. And also they chose to adopt my sisters. But my mom's a twin and her twin only had 1 child. And so I wonder if, I've kind of asked about it, but I've never gotten a clear answer. And I wonder if also they had kids in like the 70s and 80s. And so like, I wonder if they just weren't even looking for that,
Right. Yeah.
Technology is new. So
yeah,
I didn't even know why she couldn't have any other kids kind of thing. And I mean, for me, I had to go in and get a hysterosalpingogram, which I'd never heard of, HSG. And
yep, never heard of it.
I had a blocked fallopian tube. That was one of the issues with the fibroid and things you probably didn't even know about 30 years ago. And also just didn't talk about. They weren't like, oh yeah, so-and-so's infertile. Like, no, that's not, they have secondary infertility. I'd never heard that. So
right.
Yeah, it's kind of a newer thing, but. And my daughter also, she's like, I'm going to have 10 babies. I'm like, okay, good luck. I will help.
God bless her.
One and then see how it goes.
And I know, right? And it's funny. I was watching Married at First Sight. I don't know if you watch that or not. It's a guilty pleasure. It's
What's it called? Say it again.
Married at First Sight.
Oh no, okay, I haven't seen that.
one lifetime. Anyway, it's as crazy as it sounds. It's literally just that. And they're literally marrying a stranger based on compatibility and things that these experts have, and they partner with these like 5 or 6 couples every year in a different city, and so it's like an experiment of science for real. Um, but they always, of course, talk about, okay, kids. And so last night, one of them was like, oh, yeah, I want to have 3. The girl was saying, I want 3. Like, it's a hard 3. That's what I want. It's what we're going to do.
Yeah.
I just laugh when I hear these things now.
Yes.
Because by no means do I want anyone to feel like I'm not going to, support them on whatever they want for their family. But, you just don't know.
Right.
And the guy was saying, I just want to start with 1 and see, you know what I mean? Like whatever God blesses us with is fine. And I'm like, he's right, girl. Listen to this new stranger / husband of yours. Like
Yeah.
but I encourage, people, I say, when you're dating, like, and I'm no guru, like I'm still in my 30s trying to figure it out, married and trying to have a kid, right? I don't have all the answers, but when you're dating, like, instead of the question being how many kids do you want, yeah, you should ask, do you want children? That's a definite. But also, what would happen if we weren't able to conceive naturally? Or have you thought about other ways to plan a family, like to see kind of where their heads at? And no one's saying that's what you're wishing for, because no one wishes this on anyone. um, but maybe it's not how many, but if we're blessed with whatever the case may be is, or if we're not blessed with that, are you open to things like adoption, or what are your thoughts on adoption or surrogacy or reproductive health? Like ask those questions, girls. Like figure out where his head's at on other things, not how many kids. Like,
No, totally. Well, and it's just so interesting. Even like with fibroids, like I had no idea how common they were, and then Black women
right,
is common, and then I just like, what is going on in our environment? Like, why is that?
Yeah.
Why is that the norm? Why is there not more research? Why are they not? When I ask my doctor, why is this happening? Will they come back? Why will they come back? Like, can I change my diet? No, they don't know anything. I'm like, I don't understand.
They're like, we don't know. Maybe we don't know.
And they just, I mean, hearing about like NIH didn't even get research money for to do research with women. They didn't require it until 30 years ago. So like they haven't even been doing this research that's very important and so could change these women's lives. So I have a lot of theories about what's going on, but why there's not more support for it is just astounding to me. And finding out, is it something we can try to change and reduce? This is not a healthy thing to have if it's causing pain and heavy bleeding and anemia and infertility. So, yeah.
So, and kind of wrapping up our chat, where are you now? Where are you now when it comes to, your journey? And I know that you just recently had a myomectomy.
Mm-hmm. So that was.
So tell us about that and how that.
Do you have another like hour and a half? No.
I know.
Yes, this journey has been exactly that. Last fall of, I guess, was it 2021? Time is so crazy right now, but I just seemed like it was mentally causing me problems, the fibroid, the big one, and just like physically, I wanted it gone. And I figured, let me just see if there's another option, because when I went to the RE, the reproductive endocrinologist, it was all these really intense procedures. And when I talked to my OB, my regular one, she said, you know what, let me put you in touch with these other OB surgeons, and they do the robotic laparoscopic myomectomies, which are much less invasive. You don't have to, it's an outpatient procedure. So I'm sure you've been researching all this, or maybe that's how yours got done.
That's how mine was. I had the robots in me.
Straight up Jetson style, like a giant robot hand.
Exactly. With arms and everything. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So you've done this. Yeah. But it's intense the first couple of days, but it was outpatient, which was much more feasible for my family. I just literally I have wonderful neighbors, and they helped watch my daughter after school every day, so I could recover. And my husband, bless him, he was my nurse and my doctor. He was like, checking out everything for me too. And it took about 2 weeks to feel basically like myself again. So once I found out that was going to be the case, I said, okay, let's get this one out. And it freed me so much. Girl, it was like literally this reawakening, this birth. I love in Spanish, they say dar la luz for giving birth, which means to give light. And I love that. I feel like that's what happened. And this happened in January 2022, just recently. And the week after is my launch for my book from the pre-sales. And it just felt like I literally had this rebirth, which is my word for the year. Like the book was kind of like my baby. I feel like I've kind of been able to fulfill that need, that creative energy. So yeah, that's where I am. This book is coming out in April. It feels like this labor of love that my daughter and I got to create together. And I don't know, like there is a small chance if I did IVF, I could possibly have a kid, but I'm like, I don't know if I'm in that space. I'm going to be 42 this year. So I'm kind of, I don't know. I'm like I'm in an interesting space. I'm still becoming, as Michelle would say. I'm trying to figure out life, but I'm also not, like craving this other baby. I feel like that was something that I really regret with my daughter. I wasn't as present with her because I kept thinking about this future child and like this future life for us. And so I kind of like, I'm at peace with, she's going to be our one and only probably, and her and the dog. And just feeling really good about that and feeling good about this new career in writing. And I already have another children's book in mind, and my publisher is very supportive. So yeah, that's kind of where we are now. I mean,
I love it. And we may have to chat. I haven't really shared this lot on the podcast, but I started also writing children's books a couple years ago.
Yes.
From the pandemic. And so actually my husband and I, and so we have like 2 that we put through Amazon, like self-published, just in the last month.
Congratulations. That's huge.
Yeah, it's been exciting. And also just one of those like COVID creativity moments of like, it needs to get down on paper, it needs to get done.
Yes, great.
But I have one in mind in regards to kind of what we're talking about, that I wrote probably in 2020 that I haven't even looked at or touched, quite honestly, probably since I just put it on paper one day. But it was about being a mommy in many ways, and just talking about all the ways, whether it is through surrogacy or through adoption or fostering or through
bonus mom.
Yes, I have bonus mom in there. And so, or, having reproductive health issues and seeing a doctor to help along the way. So I don't know, we may have to chat and I don't know, discuss something with that. But I that's one thing one of those that I want to work on some more and get out into the world maybe in the next year. So I may have to chat with you on that too.
Oh my God, girl, I know. I kind of want to be your best friend. I hope that's not too forward, but
we're good. We're just going to exchange phone numbers now, and then we'll just text instead of just doing like DMs on Instagram.
Love it. Well, what you're saying too, like I was listening to meditation and it says pain is a conduit for creativity. Yes. And I feel like that's exactly what we're doing.
That's what it is. That is it.
It's really helping. It's very cathartic, I find.
Yes.
I believe it.
I love that quote. I'm writing it down.
Yeah.
All right. So how can people find you and your book and all of that good stuff, and definitely pre-order your book coming out on brighter days?
Yes, great. Thank you. So I'm not very creative with my my naming. I'm actually more recently back on social media because of triggering from seeing lots of birth and nonsense and pregnancy things. So the book is at KylaSaphirBooks.com. So it's my name, KylaSap as in Peter, HIR books.com. Instagram is at Kyla_Saphir_books. And my Facebook is under my name, Kyla Saphir. Again, I'm not creative. Maybe one day once I have, 10 books under my belt. But yeah, so we're hoping that the book will come out and be delivered by World Only Child Day, or it's on April 12th. And that's like a special day to honor only children. So that's our, in our little world of moms, it's kind of a special day. So I hope everyone can get their book on that day.
That's really amazing. And you taught me something else because I actually did not know about that day specifically. But I really learn something every time we record or on social in our communities. Someone, was like, oh, That's a day, it's a week, it's an awareness month, and I'm just learning. So that was a new one for me. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, and I do feel like I'm back now on social media, literally in the last like month and a half or 2 months, and I felt like so much more able to handle it. I don't know, other moms, I'm sure a lot of people talk about it can be triggering, but I felt like only support. I made all these connections to fibroid groups. I found you, fertility, people would struggle with fertility. I found some only child community. I just like,
Mhm.
I'm not like a huge fan of social media in general, but I wish I had these communities like 2 years ago, but I couldn't access it. So I am very grateful for that and for you and all what you're doing. I'd love listening to all these women's stories and what they're using this pain to create this, to make this creativity outlet.
So what a journey, what a story. And, one of my biggest things, because I'm doing it with this podcast and with social media is, taking pain, right? And taking difficult situations and really flipping them into something good and something beautiful and, a space that can help someone else out as you continue to move through your journey. And so I once again applaud Kyla for doing just that. She's done it multiple times and she's still going to continue to do it in the space of being an author. But my takeaways, I'm going to give you a couple. Number one from Kyla, advocating, and we say it like almost every episode, but I'm going to keep saying it because advocating for the tests that we don't get offered to us like automatically. I love that she talked about living in different countries and the healthcare being different for women, right? She talked about getting a breast ultrasound offered to her and taking that up. And it was part of her just everyday women's health situation. And talking about getting internal ultrasounds and doing these preventative things that we are just simply not being offered, from my knowledge and from my perspective, as part of our regular OBG care, right? So like continuing to find out, okay, what are the tests that I can ask for? Because they are probably not going to offer it to me until something's wrong. And that is the absolute wrong way to go about, creating a better place for women's health, reproductive health, is by, attacking things as they happen versus being proactive. So reach out to me, reach out to Kyla, whoever you may know in this space, or even a trusted medical professional or whatever it is, to find out, okay, what are the tests that I can ask for that I may not be getting offered when it comes to my, feminine health. That's number one. Number two, create or find your own space of community. So Kyla talked about creating this space through yoga, and then creating her own studio, which was amazing. I know everyone's not going to do that. I'm not going to do that, right? But she found and created her own space of community to have women of like minds, from different backgrounds come together and have a space to just pour into and be there for one another in support. So that was amazing. Number three, I think it was great that Kyla talked to her daughter, as young as she was, honestly, about what was happening. Because here's the thing, kids are smarter than we think. They understand more than we think. And I think especially having a daughter, for her to have that open line of communication so early on around things like infertility or, mommy's women's health issues, I hope and pray is going to continue into her, adolescence and teenage and adult life. And so these things will not be out of the conversation realm, right? We've talked about on numerous episodes, especially for women of color, like us just not feeling like we are able to ask these questions to our moms or our grandmas, or we didn't talk about that, or we can't bring that up, right, in the household. But why not? And so that's the approach that, I plan on taking with our children moving forward, our future babies. But I applaud Kyla for understanding that, I want to talk to her in a way that she understands, but also in an honest way. And so that she's asking me questions, now, and she understands kind of what's going on. That was just dope to me. So again, a takeaway and kudos to Kyla for making that part of her chats with her daughter. And then the fourth thing, of course, is to support her book, On Brighter Days, available now. Go ahead, order that book, check it out. If someone you know is in need of this book, if they are dealing with secondary infertility or they have dealt with it, like, gift them this book. This is a book for the entire family, for the kids, for everyone to really just understand what it's like, and then to find a positive and a silver lining in all of that as you go along your journey to whatever it may be next. So her books are available at kylasaphir.com. That's KYLASAPHIR books.com. And then, of course, her Instagram is Kyla_Saphir_books. So support her and check her out. And while you're supporting, okay, support us on social media at Fertility Ain't Fair on Facebook and Instagram and on our website. And if you have not purchased your My Fertility Ain't Fair journal, please do so on Amazon right now. I think that's it, guys. I mean, that was a lot of takeaways, but it was a great episode. I hope you all feel the same and that you are ready for another episode coming to you very soon this month of Fertility for the podcast. Like, follow, and share. And until next time, I am your forever friend in fertility. Stay hopeful.